My grandma's house always gave me a horrible feeling, and my family won't tell me the truth. My great-grandparents built a house in a small town when they were young. This was around 100 years ago, but the house still remains intact and in good condition. Somehow it doesn't look old at all. The only thing that aged is the town. The house is a two-story. Both of my great-grandparents lived here until they died. May they rest in peace. Since young, this house always gave me a bad feeling. When you get inside, you can feel the air get heavier, and there's this unnerving silence. As I grew up, things got worse. I always felt someone/something observing me. Sometimes I can feel it coming closer to me. I can't help but run when this happens. This happens all the time, day or night, alone or in company. I have thought that there is something wrong with my brain, but scans showed there isn't. It didn't help when my little cousin and my friends started telling me they felt the same thing. We all have a weird story in here. My little cousin claims she saw a man cleaning the rug of the hall. Weirdly enough, the description matched with my great-grandfather, someone who she never met. She was 3 at the time, and he passed away way before she was born. If my parents are around, the lights turn on and off on their own all the time. They used to say it was our friend of the lights for calming us when we were younger. For me, it was always the stairs. Those goddamn stairs. I could never get near them. There's a door that separates the living room and the stairs. I can always hear noises upstairs, even if it's been years since someone slept there. Everyone hears them, no one cares. One day, I was home alone. I think I was 12, but I'm not sure anymore. I was chilling watching TV, and I heard a weird noise, like a doorknob being pulled. I paused the TV to listen, and I thought someone broke in. I just stared, and after what felt like an eternity, I heard someone running downstairs. These were not normal steps. They were heavy and loud. It was running. Bare feet, no shoes. I could hear the skin making contact with the sticky floor. Each step was louder than before. My mind froze, skin pale. I knew I had nowhere to go as the door was next to the stairs. I also knew something was really wrong. I stood on the opposite side of the room, shaking. Everything was so heavy. Once the stairs finished, nothing came out of the door. I was crying, praying to everything I can think of. After minutes, I decided to go check. Not a wise decision, I know, but I needed to know nothing was on the other side. I could not wait hours for someone to come. I never could. Each step I did towards it, my gut wrenched more and more until I couldn't walk anymore, so I ran and hid under my blankets. When we got home, my parents asked if everything was okay, and did this weird sign they always do. Shut up. Haven't you learned anything? The noise of the key entering the door made my grandma get up. She grabbed me and pulled me to a room. You told them we are here. She moved the bed and opened a door in the floor. She somehow put the bed back in place after we got in and told me to not say a word. My mom died when she was 18. Now I know why. 10. The day had finally come. I've been waiting months, no, years for this day. I had read up on all of the history. I could feel the anticipation rising in my chest as the clock seemed to slow down. 9. My mind is beginning to race as I try to steady my thoughts. Even after spending months researching and prepping for this day, I knew nothing could prepare me for this. No, I'd have to pray to any and every god. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on the sounds of my heart racing, my fan, which is always on even when the air outside chilled me to my bones, and my cats, sleeping peacefully beside me. Oh shit. My cats. I didn't even think about them. Nothing in my research said anything about animals. Would they know what was going on? Would they be safe? I tried to focus again. 8. My phone buzzing next to me jolted me back to society. I rarely ever receive messages, especially this close to midnight. I was worried it might have been my best friend attending one of those out in the woods parties. Was she in trouble? I reached for my phone to check it, but someone was holding me back, fear. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring myself to pick up the phone to check the message. Not yet. Whoever it is can wait. 7. I felt like my heart had moved into my throat and began to pound in an all too familiar pattern as I tried to ignore my phone, as the buzzing kept starting and stopping as if someone was frantically trying to call. My cats began to stir, having been awoken by said phone. Shit, I muttered, trying to decide the best course of action. 6. Try as I might, I could not get myself to relax. I'd read the stories and heard the legends my father told me as a child. Most people are known to survive this far, live on to tell their stories. But my mom wasn't one of them. She passed before I could remember her. Dad said I was stronger than her, and I'd always believed him. But as time ticks on, he might have been lying. Hoping that if he said enough, he could speak it into existence. 5. I opened my eyes briefly to see that the cats seemed to have jumped off the bed. The room was dark, with only a sliver of light coming from my window. I took a deep breath and shut my eyes, afraid of looking anywhere as the time ticked on, slower and slower with each passing minute. 4. The pounding in my ears is becoming unbearable. I try to keep my breath steady, my eyes closed, and I try to count each tick from the clock. My phone, which had finally stopped buzzing, seemed to be making a new sound, almost like someone was trying to unlock it. 3, 2, 1. I winced as I began to feel the sharp pain in my left wrist. I wanted to open my eyes, but I knew better. Time continues to slow down as the pain finally subsides, and my heart begins to take its regular place in my body. I knew this nightmare was coming. Dad said it was typical for our little country for this little tradition that occurs on a woman's 18th birthday. Time seems to stop, and the creature breathes heavily over my shoulder. The tattoo is always the first thing to appear, symbolizing your future and what's to come. Children grow up hoping to see if they can be one of the special ones, and the creature knows this. It knows how to grab your attention. I focused again on the sounds around me. My mom was unfortunate. Nobody warned her of what was to come. She only knew about the symbol. Looking at it cost her life. If I follow in her footsteps, I'm in for a night I'd regret. I fought to keep my eyes shut as time ticked on. Ever so slowly. And as I felt the pain rise again, all I could do was hope. Hope I make it to 0. I finally figured out what's been living in my fireplace. There's something living in my fireplace. The ancient thing hasn't worked since we moved in, and I imagine it's been decades since a real flame scorched the insides of the cinder block chimney. Although, the blackened space where logs once rested is evidence that it did, indeed, once upon a time burn red and orange. Now, the only signs of life coming from the old fireplace is an occasional spider emerging from the cobweb-laden hearth. That was, of course, until I started hearing the noises. I started hearing the strange noises at night, while the house lay quiet. I could hear the low murmurs as I crept down the stairs. Each night, however, as I reached the landing where the living room became visible, the noises disappeared. Whatever was making the noises clearly knew when I was coming, and made good to quiet each time I attempted to approach it. Last night, however, I took the stairs from our master suite balcony instead of the main interior staircase to investigate the noise. I neared the living room window in anticipation to catch the night disturber in action, only to bump my forehead on the window before I could peer inside. Cursing at my stupidity, I quickly used my hands as a tent and glared through the window. No movement. I was just about to settle for another night of unanswered questions when I noticed the tiniest movement on the fireplace stoop. It quickly leapt up into the cobwebs of the hearth. It was so small and quick, I almost thought it was a mouse. Until, at the last second, I caught a glimpse of something that I swear stopped the world around me. A tiny pair of legs struggled to get through the dense webbing. A tiny pair of legs wearing pants, attached to a tiny pair of feet wearing shoes. There was no mistaking it, there was at least one tiny human living in the fireplace. I could hardly sleep the rest of the night. My mind raced with thoughts of the impossible creatures that lived in our fireplace. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Once my wife and kids had left for the day, I hesitantly, but excitedly approached the fireplace. I crept quietly to the fireplace and used my fingers to create an opening in the cobwebs. Once I had torn enough of the webbing apart to see what lay beyond the hearth, I couldn't believe my eyes. Behind the hearth, I could see several small blankets and pillows scattered about. Unable to contain my curiosity, I pulled my phone out and entered video mode. I stuck the end of the phone through the webs and rotated it several times. I pulled the phone out and hastily hit the play button. It was absolutely incredible. There lay an entire sleeping village of minuscule people at the back of the fireplace. There were too many to count. There were small tables, chairs, benches, and beds. They clearly weren't modern humans. If I had to guess, I'd say they resembled the early settlers in appearance. I watched the video over and over again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. All I knew was that I had a call to make. It was around 4 p.m. when I shook the man's hand before he got back in his van and drove off. I had to hurry. My wife would be home with the kids soon. I raced to the living room and reached my hand up to the mantel searching. Once I had found what I was looking for, I knelt beside the fireplace stoop. As soon as I had finished, the front door opened, and the kids ran in to give me a hug. I looked up to see my wife enter the house. She flashed me a huge smile as she said, "You fixed the fireplace." I smiled back as I raised the lighter to the gas line of the fireplace. It didn't take the fireplace repairman long to find the hidden shut-off in the basement below the fireplace. It took 2 clicks of the lighter, and the old fireplace roared back to life. I slid the old glass fireplace doors closed and stepped back to admire its beauty. I pulled my family in close to appreciate the new life we had given the old fireplace. The excited chatter of my children almost masked the sound of tiny fists pounding on glass and the almost indiscernible screams that lay beyond it. My parents went hiking 3 days ago. The search party going their GoPro was still recording. My parents went hiking 3 days ago. Their GoPro was found still recording. It was sudden. We got a call from a nearby city's police station. Our uncle, who was taking care of me and my sister while our parents were away, answered the phone. We were confused as to why our uncle was crying until we learned the news. Our parents were found dead over 11 miles away from where they started hiking over 3 days ago. I was horrified. I felt as if my world has just splintered into nothing, and my sister just fell to the floor while I just sat there, blank face and warm tears running down my cheeks. The sheriff was obligated to ask us where we wanted the funeral, and other questions. Thankfully, my uncle pulled himself together and scheduled his own brother and sister-in-law's funeral by himself. The weeks flew by as the weekend was over, and I was left in a well of grief, still processing all that had recently happened. Eventually, we got another call, telling us that another piece of evidence had been found. We initially dismissed it, until they told us that it belonged to our parents. As they told us, the more intrigued we were, until my uncle decided to drive us all down there. After all of us at least wanted to see their faces one more time, since mysteriously, the funeral was closed casket. Once we got there, we waited in the waiting room until a man guided us in. They said they had not yet reviewed the footage, and that when they found it, it was covered in blood and still recording even though it was clearly damaged. Finally, we got to a room where they were ready to play the footage, and all of us took a seat before the man who led us and started the video. At first, it was just my parents walking. We fast-forwarded, more walking, some fishing, picking up sticks and skipping rocks. I was simply happy to see my parents again, even if it was just a recording. We went to the next video. My parents were just walking, but looked noticeably tired and anxious. Eventually, while they were resting, my mother broke the silence. "Did you hear any of that last night?" My father responded, "Yeah, it sounded so odd, like it was directly in my ear, but also near a mile away." She gave him an agreeing nod. Eventually they kept walking, not breaking the silence until they camped. "Do you think it will happen again?" my mother asked. My father responded, "It had to have been just some animal. No creature would follow us that far just to make some noises and not do anything to us. But what if it dash?" My mother was cut off. "Just trust me, we'll leave tomorrow and forget any of this happened." My father tried to reassure her. It worked and they went to bed. On the third day though, something was off. My mother no longer had her bright energy accompanying her, and my father seemed to be suffering from sleep deprivation. It felt as though my parents were just husks of their former selves. And more ominous than that, there was a strange, faint background noise constantly playing for the first 3 hours. Then it just stopped. My parents looked around and seemed to sigh and become way more relaxed. Then they stopped for a food break at a small creek. It seemed good, until that noise started back up, and louder than before. This caused notable dread in my parents, as the fear in their eyes was visible. They both ran away, leaving all their food behind, as the noise kept getting louder. Eventually, my mother tripped and her bone-chilling screams could be heard in the background as the noise seemed to stop with her. After 2 hours of non-stop running, my father ended up at our house backyard. I heard him sobbing uncontrollably. He was a mess just by the audio. He started to get it together and approach our house until the light around him seemed to wash away, like fresh paint in reaction to water. We sat there watching this overwhelming silence and darkness until it was broken by a faint sound. It got louder and louder until it felt like my eardrums were about to pop. My father appeared back in the woods, but he was not alone. As he turned, a part of the screen seemed to warp and glitch out. My father looked at it and started screaming as the thing approached him in the blink of an eye. My father seemed to be screaming as something was inserted into his mouth, then it stopped when the snapping of his bones was heard. The GoPro fell onto the ground, and it filmed my father floating over the glitching part of the screen. Then both of them just seemed to phase out of focus and into nothingness. I was in shock by what I saw, and so was everyone else in the room with me. My sister was pale, and my uncle looked completely mortified. Finally, the police escorted us out. The drive home was silent, and we all seemed to not dare to speak a word, because, in the silence, we all heard it. The faint sound of the thing that killed my parents, slowly approaching. My wife of 7 years wore a red ribbon on her wrist. When I found out why, it shocked me to my core. I am 35M and have a wonderful wife who is 32F. We have been married for 7 years and have 3 beautiful children that gave me shivers of excitement down my spine when they were born. My wife, Mary Ann, has suddenly been starting to wear a red ribbon around her wrist ever since our last date night, July 18th, 2023. I wonder sometimes why she wore it. The day I found out why she did was the day I almost hung myself out of confusion. "Honey, you're back from work," she said with a slight grin on her face whilst tightening the ribbon around her wrist. "Hi babe, the office was a bit crowded today, so my boss let me come home early," as I replied, a disgusting stench drafted into my nostrils. I immediately gagged, wonder what the hell the smell was, and noticed it came from the direction in which my wife Saturday. "Babe, what is that smell?" I say, pinching my nose in disgust. "Oh, nothing," she said a few moments later. I looked at the red ribbon and noticed it was a bit stained. So without warning, I just pulled it off. Beneath the ribbon was the most vile thing I have ever witnessed in my entire life. There underneath the ribbon was bits of torn flesh, rotting as maggots swarmed her hand. I instantly shrieked and ran out of the room, barfing in the bathroom. I am currently writing this post as she is banging on the bathroom door begging me to open it up. What should I do?